Well, we're back into our look at the Flat Earth movement. In our first lesson, I gave you a short little rundown of what the movement believes. They do not believe that the Earth is a globe, that it's a sphere. They believe that it's a round, flat plate. I told you in that lesson that they would tell you that the North Pole is at the center of the plate, and they would also tell you that there is no such thing as Antarctica. Even though, as I shared with you a few months ago, our United States Marines were stationed in, where else? Yeah, Antarctica. But the Flat Earth movement would tell you, no, they're all lying. All of them that are there in that continent, they're all lying. There is no Antarctica. They'll tell you that there's a massive ice wall that is at the edge of the plate that's holding all the water in. They would tell you that there's a sky dome that covers somewhat like a dome that you would put over a cake on a plate. They do not believe in gravity. We shared all of those things in the first lesson. And it's troubling, certainly, that there are people, and of course, unfortunately, the numbers are growing, that subscribe to these various theories. What makes it even worse is when those who are in this movement then take the Bible and then go looking through the Bible and pulling phrases and verses out of the Bible in order to justify their position. That's saddening. I do want to once again give credit where credit is due to Jeff Acheson. This article really that I'm drawing from and then giving my own thoughts to it. The article can be found on calvaryoxnard.org. That's one word, calvaryoxnard.org. He did the hard work, and I'm just going to be touching on a few things from his paper, but you can see it in its entirety. So let's look at some of the passages that the Flat Earth movement uses to justify their position. They'll tell you that the Earth is flat, but the question is, and Acheson brings it up in his paper, he says, is the whole Earth visible at once? Is the whole Earth visible at once? Well, flat earthers will go to Job 28:24 to try to justify that. And in Job 28:24 it says, "For he views the ends of the earth and sees everything under the heavens." So they would say, well, see, it says right there that he sees everything. He sees all of earth. And so it must be flat. God doesn't look at the earth from a single fixed vantage point. You and I must remember that God exists outside of time. God does not exist in his creation. He exists outside of time. He can see the past, the present, as well as the future all at one time. God is omnipresent. He's everywhere. He sees everything. And that's what the passage really means. As Acheson brings up, if God existed within our creation, as flat earthers would tell you, instead of outside of it, then they would be limiting, obviously, his deity, his omnipresence. God exists in what Paul calls the third heaven. The first heaven is simply where the birds and clouds are. The second heaven is where the stars and the constellations are, and the sun and the moon and other things. That's the second heaven. God exists in the third heaven. And in 2 Corinthians, he calls it paradise. That's where God exists. That's where God lives. He sees everything, not because the earth is flat, but because he's omnipresent. And he's omniscient. And of course, he's omnipotent. Another question that's brought up, can an extremely tall object be seen by everyone on earth? Flat earthers will tell you yes. They go to Daniel chapter 4. Verses 10 and 11. I'll read it for you. "Behold, there was a tree in the midst of the earth, and its height was great. The tree grew large and became strong, and its height reached to the sky, and it was visible to the end of the earth." And of course, the flat earthers will go, there you go. The tree was so tall that everyone on the planet saw it, and if everyone on the planet saw it, then the earth must be flat. Unfortunately, for this movement, they draw that conclusion from 2 verses, 10 and 11, but they fail to keep reading. And if they would just keep reading the scriptures, they would come to find out that the passage is not talking about reality. The passage is talking about a dream. In fact, let me read it to you. Daniel 4, beginning in verse 20. It's the same chapter. The tree that you saw, which became large and grew strong, whose height reached to the sky and was visible to all the earth, and whose foliage was beautiful and its fruit abundant, and in which was food for all, under which the beasts of the field dwelled, and whose branches the birds of the sky lodged. It is you, O king, for you have become great and grown strong, and your majesty has become great and reached to the sky, and your dominion to the end of the earth. The tree wasn't an actual real tree. The tree was a dream. It was in a dream. It wasn't meant to be something taken literally. The tree was symbolic. You cannot just go to the scriptures and rip passages out or certain phrases or certain verses. You have to read it in its context. Another question which is asked, can you see the whole earth from a tall mountain? They'll go to Matthew 4 verse 8. Again, the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world in their splendor. But even in that passage, the world which is being spoken about was a vision which is supernatural. Acheson writes, even if the earth were flat, it would have been a miraculous thing to see the distant kingdoms. Therefore, this verse doesn't prove a flat earth or disprove a global earth. Another question, does Yeshua's return prove a flat earth? I actually had a woman tell me this one. Revelation 1:7. Behold, he is coming with the clouds, and every eye will see him. And so she said, well, see right there, when Yeshua comes back, when Jesus comes back, every eye will see him, and if everybody sees him, then the earth must be flat. But that's a problem in and of itself. Right now, if you were to, let's say, if you were to go, let's say, on a plane, or you see a plane up in the sky, like we're here in Palm Beach County, and that plane is way up high in the sky. Folks, can the people in Orlando see that plane? Obviously not. So if a person is up in the sky, and if you can't see a plane from Orlando here, and the plane is in Palm Beach County, how is everybody going to see Yeshua when he comes back at the Mount of Olives? Now, if the phrase, every eye will see him, simply meaning, you could take it both two ways. You could simply say, every eye will see him as in acknowledge that he has returned. Or technologically speaking, everybody has a smartphone, everybody has internet, and so it would not be difficult for the entire world to go ahead and know that he has returned. Either one of those options are there. I think it personally means that every eye will see him, everybody will know that he has returned. That's what that passage means. Another question that they ask, or is asked in the paper, is the horizon a fixed line? Is the horizon a fixed line? If you've ever been on a boat or a cruise ship, you look out over the ocean, you will see the horizon line. You will see, and it looks like where the water meets the sky. And that line is going across, called the horizon line. The Flat Earth movement will tell you that horizon line is a reality. That is the edge, they will tell you, of where the massive ice wall is at the edge of Earth. But the problem with that is, if you've ever been on a ship, and you've seen that horizon line out there, all this water of the ocean, and then you see the horizon line. If you took the ship and you start moving in that direction, do you know what eventually is going to happen? You're not going to hit the massive ice wall, but you will start to see islands. You're going to start to see islands, and you're probably going to see a shoreline from a land, from a country, what have you. So the question is, well, why didn't you see it before? You looked out over, you saw a horizon line. Why couldn't you see it? He makes he makes the point in his paper. The verse is brought up, Job 26, verse 10. He marks out the horizon on the face of the waters for a boundary between light and darkness. And then Acheson writes on here, yet flat earthers admit that you can't see the distant islands over the ocean. Their convoluted explanations involve optical distortions and thermal convections over the ocean. But even from the highest point on Hawaii, Mauna Kea, at 13,803 feet high, known for incredibly clear visibility at the summit, one cannot see mainland USA, not even with the most powerful telescope. This makes no sense on a flat Earth. At that highest point, 13,800 feet, you're at the top of the mountain, you cannot see California. So it just goes to show that horizon, it's simply because of, like Acheson said, it's thermal convection. It doesn't mean that there's nothing out there. If you went in that direction, you're going to eventually hit islands or land. They're there. Another question that is brought up, where are the ends of the earth? Job 37 verse 3 is used. He unleashes his lightning beneath the whole heaven and sends it to the ends of the earth. And so the movement will say, see, it says the ends of the earth. So there's an end to the earth. The earth is flat and there's an end to it. Another passage they use, Isaiah 11 verse 12. He will raise a banner for the nations and gather the exiles of Israel. He will assemble the scattered people of Judah from the four quarters of the earth. Another passage, Revelation 7:1. After this I saw four angels standing at the four corners of the earth, holding back the four winds of the earth to prevent any wind from blowing on the land or on the sea or on any tree. Now wait a minute. Now I'm confused. They told me that the earth is a round plate. Remember? They said that the United Nations gave it away, that their flag shows you what earth really looks like. That it's a round, flat plate. Now they say, well, wait a minute. It's not round. It has corners. So now it's square. Well, wait a minute. Is it round? Is it a round plate or is it a flat plate, like a four-cornered plate? Because in my kitchen, we have round plates and we have four-cornered plates, square plates. So which is it? The four corners simply means north, east, south, west. It's a figure of speech. It's called a metaphor. It's a metaphor. When God says He's going to bring in the dispersion, those who have been scattered, from the four corners, it doesn't mean that earth has corners. He's talking about north, east, south, west. He's going to draw His people from all over the world. That's all it means. It's a metaphor. You use metaphors all the time. You may say, you know what, my boss, he has a heart of stone. Well, does that mean that his heart is actually made of stone? Or when I say, you know, my mother, she had a heart of gold. Does that mean her heart was really made of gold? Of course not. It's a figure of speech. It's a metaphor. When the term four corners of the earth is used, it doesn't mean that earth has four corners. They also continue on that earth does not move, that it's stationary, that everything else moves, the sun moves, everything else moves, but earth is stationary, and they go to 1 Chronicles 16 verse 30 as one of their verses. 1 Chronicles 16 verse 30, tremble before Him all the earth, here it comes. The world is firmly established. It cannot be moved. Psalm 93 verse 1 is another one. The Lord reigns, He is robed in majesty. The Lord is robed in majesty and armed with strength. Indeed, the world is established, firm and secure. Acheson writes, when the Bible speaks of the earth's permanence, it isn't speaking in terms of movement through space. It is speaking of the stability of the earth beneath one's feet, which illustrates how God is unchanging, faithful, and reliable. For the person standing on the surface of the earth, it doesn't seem to move, and mountains seem to stand there forever. These passages are making no reference to how the earth moves through space. It simply means about permanence, stability. God has established something that his creation is firmly established. That's all that means. Now, some of the other verses, and Atchison brings up, he goes, now consider Psalm 46, verse 2. Psalm 46, verse 2, therefore we will not fear, though the earth should change, and though the mountains slip into the heart of the sea. Job 9, 5 and 6. It is God who removes the mountains. They know not how. When he overturns them in his anger, who shakes the earth out of its place and its pillars tremble? So he writes, flat earthers insist the earth doesn't move at all, but according to these verses, the earth does move and change, and the mountains eventually crumble. Clearly, verses about the world being, quote-unquote, firmly established, and that it, quote-unquote, cannot be moved, are dramatic figures of speech, and they have nothing to do with the planet moving through space, end quote. Another thing they will bring up from the scriptures is that earth has, foundations and pillars. Pillars, and these are the passages that they use. Psalm 104, verse 5, he set the earth on its foundations. It can never be moved. 1 Samuel 2, verse 8, for the foundations of the earth are the Lord's. On them he has set the world. And then this one, Psalm 75, verse 3. When the earth and all its people quake, it is I who holds its pillars firm. Now, if you took those verses literally, then not only is earth flat, what they're saying, but there's pillars underneath it, like pillars that's holding up a ceiling. Like he says, that sitting on actual pillars are these metaphors for God's creative work, like an architect or a carpenter building a home. He says, look at the larger context of the first passage, Psalm 104, but he's reading, beginning in verse number 1. Listen, bless the Lord, O my soul. O Lord my God, you are very great. You are clothed with splendor and majesty, covering yourself with light as with a cloak, stretching out heaven like a tent curtain. He lays the beams of his upper chambers in the waters. He makes the clouds his chariot. He walks upon the wings of the wind. He makes the winds his messengers, flaming fire his ministers. He established the earth upon its foundations so that it will not totter forever and ever. These are all metaphors. It's all beautiful poetry, and they're metaphors. They're not to be taken literally as if the earth is a plate that's sitting on pillars. Okay? You have to understand when you're reading scriptures, these are authors who are using figures of speech. Take, for instance, when we go to the Apostle John and his epistles. The Apostle John tells you to walk in the light. Okay, well, if I'm to take that literally, then what do I do when it's dark out? If I'm only supposed to be walking in the light. Well, what am I supposed to do when the lights are off in the bedroom and I have to get up in the middle of the night for some reason? What am I supposed to do? Do I have to turn on a light because I'm not supposed to walk in the darkness? It's a figure of speech. It's a metaphor. What about these passages, by the way? Job 26, verse 11. The pillars of heaven tremble and are amazed at his rebuke. Now, if we take those passages literally, what are those passages saying? Not only does earth have pillars underneath it, heaven has pillars. Okay? Another passage or another term that they will use, I've gone through this discussion as well with some, is the word from the book of Genesis. The word is firmament. Firmament. And by the way, the King James Bible is the only version that uses this term. Oh, I think the New King James as well. So for some reason, the King James and the New King James use this term firmament. No other translation does. And here it is, taken from King James. Genesis 1, beginning of verse 6. Then God said, "Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters." Thus God made the firmament, and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament. And it was so. And God called the firmament heaven. So the evening and the morning were the second day. Now, the firmament doesn't mean a sky dome, but that's exactly what flat earthers will tell you, that there's some kind of sky dome. It's positioned over this flat Earth, and on this sky dome, that's where all your stars are, that's where all your planets are, and they're on that sky dome. Again, as we mentioned in our last lesson, if that were so, and there's a sky dome there, then as I travel out towards the edge of the Earth, towards where supposedly this massive white ice wall is, right? Because there is no such thing as Antarctica. But if I continue to travel outside to the edge of the plate, won't the stars that are on the sky dome, won't they get bigger? Because I'm getting closer to them. But notice they never do. Because there is no sky dome there. Now, why did King James use that particular term? Atchison gets into it. You can certainly read more into that when you get to his paper. But the Hebrew word there is rakia. Rakia. And it's best explained as stamping out or stretching forth, or an expanse. And if you look at other versions of Scripture, the New American Standard, ESV, NIV, and others as well, that's the term that they've chosen to use, expanse, because that's the proper term. Okay. I'm moving along, and by the way, as a note, when it comes to looking up words, I understand that the Blue Letter Bible is handy. It's on the internet. It's free. I've used it plenty of times. When you're looking up a term, whether it be Hebrew or Greek, I strongly advise, if you're doing Bible study, do not use Strong's Concordance. Do not use Strong's Concordance. A Strong's Concordance, all that is you look up the word, and Strong's Concordance is telling you how the authors of the translation, how they took the word and defined it or used it. What you need is a lexicon. That's where you go and you pull out, you can go to a lexicon and you look up a particular word in Hebrew or Greek, and it will tell you what it is. A concordance doesn't do that. Just for you to know when you do your Bible studies. Okay. By the way, the ESV Study Bible deals with that word firmament. I'll go ahead and read it to you. Genesis 1, 6 and 8, they explain it. As light was separated from darkness, so waters are separated to form an expanse. Verses 6 and 7, which God calls heaven in verse 8. As the ESV footnote illustrates, by offering the alternative term sky, it is difficult to find a single English word that accurately conveys the precise sense of the Hebrew term shamayim, which is heaven or heavens. In this context, it refers to what humans see above them, i.e., the region that contains both celestial lights, as in verses 14 through 17, and the birds, verse number 20. Even Atchison in his paper, he asked, what about Job 37, verse 18? Because in Job 37, verse 18, it reads this, can you join him in spreading out the skies, hard as a mirror of cast bronze? Well, he says flat earthers point to Job 37:18 as a reference to the solid dome heavens above. Actually, in this passage, Elihu is referring to wind, clouds, lightning, storms, ice, downpours of rain, south winds. So this hard cast bronze sky is referring to a heavy storm cloud, because the wind comes to clear it up in verse 21. And once again, here's another example as we looked in the book of Daniel before. You can't just take one verse and you can't just take one phrase from one verse to try and justify a point. You have to read Scripture in its context. In verse 21 of that same chapter, clearly, we're not talking about some mirror that's up there. We're talking about a storm cloud because, as Atchison says, the winds come and take it away. All right, well, that's as far as we're going to get on the second lesson. I've showed you now in the first lesson what the Flat Earth movement believes, what they teach. Unfortunately, in the second lesson, I showed you where they've gone to the Bible, of all things, to try and pull out phrases and verses to justify their views. In our next lesson, I'm going to go to that same Bible to show you exactly what the Bible says concerning Earth being a sphere or being a globe. And the Bible tells you it. And we'll do all that in our third lesson.